To those of you joining online through our YouTube channel, we appreciate you for tuning in. Before I continue, please silence your phones. Thank you. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Sophie Yan. I am an assistant professor at the College of Architecture and Design and the program director for interior design. On behalf of the College of Architecture and Design, I'd like to thank today's design and technology sponsor, the Gensler Charitable Gift Fund. Our college is united with a broad and inclusive sense of design. We offer degrees in architecture, interior design, product design, graphic design, and game design, and we seek productive overlaps between these disciplines and other degrees offered at the university. We also recently launched a new graduate degree in design and technology, which results from these overlaps. Our lecture series allows us to engage in design discussions and offer broad perspectives on where we imagine design is headed. And through this series, we're bringing visionary designers to campus to share their ideas and engage our students and faculty. Our next lecture is Friday, March 28th at 6 p.m. with Christian Unverzagt, Design Director of M1 DTW Architects. Today is my honor to introduce Bonny Slater. Bonny is speaking about designing the future of healthcare. At the end of this lecture, we have time for a 15-minute Q&A session. Bonny Slater is a senior associate and co-global healthcare leader at Gensler, where she serves as design director. She has over 20 years of experience in creating innovative healthcare environments. With dual degrees in interior design from Parsons School of Design and Psychology from Eugene Lang College, Bonny brings a unique research-driven approach to her work, focusing on the intersection of design, human experience, and environmental psychology. Her experience spans a wide range of healthcare projects, including academic medical centers, community clinics, and international health campuses. Bonny's work has been recognized with numerous awards, such as the ASID Ones to Watch Scholar Award and multiple Gensler Design Excellence Awards. She has also been a thought leader in sustainable and trauma-informed design, contributing to publications like Medical Construction and Design and Healthcare Design. Bonny's research has explored the cultural implications of evidence-based design, the role of color in immersive environments, and the connections between design, engagement, and population health in vulnerable communities. Her recent focus on sustainability and climate action in healthcare aligns with her commitment to improving community health outcomes while addressing environmental challenges. Please help me welcome Bonny Slater.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to share a 2-year research effort that Gensler funded. And you'll hear a lot about like when you graduate and you enter the real world, how projects are so different and you don't really get a lot of time to explore the way you can as a student. Well, we're really lucky at Gensler to have a program that allows us to work outside the constraints of a typical project. And this is one of them. So we have the Gensler Research Institute. Every year we fund dozens of grants. Anybody in the firm can apply. And we put 18% of our profits back into this research. So it's a way that we can all remain nimble, explore our personal passions, and drive the industry forward. So 2 years ago, the healthcare leadership was asked to be part of what they called a measurable impact project. The idea was to take a year of research and really explore how to demonstrate the impact that we can provide to our clients in a measurable way. And they asked us to design the hospital of the future. Well, we like to break rules, and we said, no, everybody's already done that. So we started with redesigning the health system. And in the second year, we did get to a hospital. But I want to start by laying out what we did that first year in redesigning the health system as a whole. And we came in as very informed designers and started with the hypothesis of what if we could redesign our health system to both improve community health and also address the top challenges our clients were facing. What if we could do both at the same time, knowing we want to improve community health and our clients have maybe some other priorities? So what do we mean when we say improving community health? We're not talking about taking those who already might live to 85 and getting them to live to 120. That's not what we're talking about. We're really talking about a health equity issue. The reality is that we have extreme health disparities in this country within the same city. Chicago, DC, Detroit is probably similar. You have massive gaps in life expectancy within just a mile of each other. And this is a factor of, a lot of socioeconomic factors go into it. What are the educational and job opportunities there? What kind of support do you have? The physical environment, is there safe and healthy housing? Are you nearby pollution sources? Individual health behaviors go towards a lot of that, but alongside that are the educational background that allows you to make those healthy choices. Healthcare itself is only about 20% of the equation. So the big takeaway here is if we actually want to improve community health for everybody, reduce the gaps, we need to look outside of traditional healthcare for the solutions. The second piece of this is what is keeping our clients up at night? And our clients being the large regional health systems, around here, Henry Ford as an example. Well, there are some differences in this list, and this data is from about 2022, 2023. The financial and workforce are consistently the top across both independent surveys and also the dozens of clients that we interviewed. But they're very tied together. So the workforce challenge of rising inflation and rising demand for wages, especially coming out of COVID, a lot of burnout, is really tied in with the financial piece. The other items on the list really depended on the individual health system. We are all aware of the mental health crisis this country has and the years of lack of funding that has really gotten us to a place of true crisis. We talked about the health equity concerns, and of course in 2022 that was really top of mind across the media. Digital integration. How do these large health systems that have pretty minimal capital constantly update to the latest technology and do what our government has been asking them to do, is actually make data talk across the lines? I'm sure you all have gone to the doctor and you might have 10 different portals for 10 different specialists, or your family has one. None of it talks to each other. And that's something that the system has been asked to shift. The AI frenzy and all of the new pharmaceutical therapies are really challenging our health systems to respond and kind of keep up with it. And then climate change. I'm going to get into a little bit about the role of healthcare in climate change, but we know that healthcare is one of the worst offenders, the biggest places to improve, but it's also a bit like a dinosaur in getting there. So we see these as opportunities for transformation rather than challenges. And so how could we think as designers in how we address all of these challenges at the same time? We were lucky enough to have 2 of the Gensler Fellow teams do additional research across this project. So in one of the years, we asked them to go deep into the climate change piece. So this was about 6 master level architecture students. We had them all summer, and they dove deep. And these are just a couple slides of the research that they did. You know, healthcare only accounts for 4.8% of the total area in the commercial world, but it's 10% of the energy use. It's really one of the most, it's like the equivalent of a Hummer in terms of a building. It sucks a lot of energy, a lot of water, produces a lot of waste, and produces a lot of the emissions. In terms of climate impacts, what you'll often hear about in the architecture industry is Scope 1 and Scope 2. So the emissions that are from on-site generators, the actual building process, the indirect life cycle of emissions. But Scope 3 is one of the biggest offenders in healthcare. This is the day-to-day thing. This is during COVID, for every patient, you're producing all of this waste and the constant buying of masks and disposable things, the transportation, the pharmaceuticals, just the amount of energy and production and waste that goes into the running of the hospitals. So, thinking about the indirect supply chain as a designer, how do we impact that when we are usually focused on the day one building? How do we get to impacting that supply chain? And the waste, it's kind of gross. 14,000 tons of waste is generated daily by US hospitals. Water, waste, energy, and then the other side of sustainability is really resilience. So this is something that there's a lot less disagreement about. The impacts of things like Hurricane Sandy. I don't know if anybody heard about the story where, NYU's generator was in the basement, and so it flooded, and they were out without power and having to carry patients down the stairs. In Texas, when they had that crazy ice storm and impact to health systems. Hospitals have to be able to run 24/7 regardless of what Mother Nature throws at them. So how do we, through this, create more resiliency when our Earth is facing a lot more of these once-in-a-lifetime events than ever before? And this also comes down to cost. So the language that our clients speak is what is the cost translation of these climate and energy issues. So put that kind of to the side for a minute. When we're thinking about healthcare transformation, this is what the industry's been talking about for a long time. My team actually created this list more than a decade ago. We were talking about, now is healthcare transformation. Everybody's moving from the whole sickness focus to wellness. We're keeping everybody healthy. We're not going to be reactive anymore. We're going to be predictive and keep people out of the hospital. Enough with the siloed specialists. We're going to be more integrated as care teams. It's going to be about relationships with your provider, no more transactions, more continuous care, resilient and patient-centered. The reality is we have not made as much progress as we thought we would have by now, because healthcare is really slow to change. It's a big ship. It's kind of like the government, getting them to change something. But, yes, and I know that's, yes. But, okay, maybe a better metaphor at a different point in time. And healthcare may be changing really rapidly too, pretty soon. So, at a point of time and when we did this research, we were coming out of the worst of COVID, and the conversation was, we're actually at a tipping point. Things have gotten so bad between COVID, we were in the midst of the equity protests, social justice protests. We were in the midst of a lot of climate crisis conversations and changing regulations. The thought was, if things are ever going to change, it's now. We finally have enough momentum behind these forces that healthcare was at the point where it was going to fail if it didn't change. And we're still at that point, although we've gotten a little bit more used to things. So it was, okay, If we can make big change, now's the time, and this is going to be our proposal. So this diagram represents the end of the first year of research. So I'm going to unpack it a little bit because there's a lot in here. The big idea is that we really need to integrate our social care systems in with healthcare to have the best impact on community health. It's been done before. Nothing in here has not been done before. It's just spotty. You know, it's not even. The big idea is that we do way too much in hospitals right now that does not need to happen there. So going back to that climate piece and the cost piece and the staffing piece, what if we shrink the hospital as much as possible? What if we really strip out what doesn't need to be there for whatever historic reason, put it where it should be, put it where it can cost less, can be a better experience for patients and staff, have a lower climate footprint, and better support our communities. So the areas in blue are primary places of care. There's still a hospital, but it's much smaller and really focused on critical care. You know, you've gotten in a car accident, you're having major surgery, you had a heart attack, really critical care. Outpatient care has already been moving out of the hospital for decades into ambulatory care, ambulatory surgery center. Well, there's a whole new generation that can now happen outside of the hospital due to these scientific advancements. What used to be an overnight procedure with recovery can now be done in an outpatient setting with a quick couple-hour recovery and you're going home. Regulations also right now prevent some of those things from coming out of the hospital, but if you look across the country, every state is different. So in some states, you can stay in an ambulatory center for a couple days as part of your recovery. Other hospitals, other states, it's no more than 24 hours. Some states, there are freestanding birth centers. Other states don't allow that. There's a lot of variation that kind of points to what's possible there. Community health hubs at the bottom, this is really the idea for what replaces primary care. It's really your health home. And models exist today for this, either in community health centers that are primarily for those who cannot afford health care. It's really a safety net system, federally funded, and it provides primary care, medical care, dental care, mental health, social services, kind of everything you need as like a one-stop shop. What's interesting is that you also have that model on the top end, like executive health, concierge care, but very few people in the middle have access to this kind of model. So it's just saying, well, what if we could make this work for everybody? And the reality is that that kind of care model has already been demonstrated through research by the government showing that you can get improved outcomes for lower cost. So, you know, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, we just need to make it more broadly accessible. And then the home. So during COVID, we saw more telehealth happen in the home than ever before, and part of that was that regulation shifted. We also saw hospital at home pilots. So hospitals were discharging people early, putting people who were more stable in their home with the kind of technology and care to get them out of the hospital. And some of these pilots have been really successful, especially when they're at scale. So looking at those two things, how can the home become more of a primary place for care so that we don't need to build as much, essentially? And as architects, that's like kind of a scary thing to say, but we're almost trying to design ourselves out of needing to build some of this stuff. ASCs and community health hubs can happen in an existing building. They can be repurposed. It doesn't need to be a new build. The areas in green are shared support. And the idea is that they're not shared support necessarily within a system, but within a community or a city. So flex zones. Well, we used to think that we would need to build hospitals for surge, you know, for a mega event. We learned very quickly that you can use from a ship to a hotel to a convention center. You can provide care in an emergency situation that you don't need to build something for that once every 20-year event. Logistics hubs. You know how we have Amazon warehouses? Well, you can have the same thing for health systems that provides everything from pharmacy and food service to supplies to centralized equipment storage as a central place so that you don't have to put it in every single hospital, and a system or a community can share it. Health systems are already starting to do this now, especially in more expensive markets like Southern California or Philadelphia. This is a necessity because it's $2,000 a square foot to build a hospital. And then the mobile fleet. So there's already pilots right now for drones that will deliver your prescription. Even better with AI, they know there's a hurricane coming, you're going to need an extra refill before it hits, and it will automatically deliver to you. Autonomous ambulances, different ways of getting care to people and also people to care, even sending an Uber to get you to your appointment. And then the blue and green, nature has been prescribed by doctors. Like, you need to spend time in nature. We know it's critical to keep everyone healthy, but a lot of our communities don't have sufficient access to it. And then the rings in yellow are really those social partnerships that the health system doesn't have to own, but you need the partnerships to provide the housing, the education, the transportation, food and nutrition, and social support to keep people healthy. Kaiser found that it was cheaper for them to build housing to house some homeless people versus care for them at the ED. I think in Massachusetts, they have a plan where doctors can give you like a debit card for healthy food because, food is medicine, and just trying to actually support financially what we know the data shows is most effective versus staying in our lanes. So anyway, this was the big idea of the first year. And what is the impact? So trying to measure this idea is a little bit challenging because you would actually need a community to do it, for us to measure it. But the overall impact should be increased longevity across a population. It should impact financially because you don't have to put as much into the resource-heavy things like hospitals, because long-term, if people stay healthier, they're out of the hospital more. You can do more care in lower-cost sites. Reduce climate, reduce carbon, because you're not building as big of those giant hospitals. You're doing more within existing spaces within your home. Employee experience. Part of the issue with the burnout is people don't want to work in hospitals, so giving them more places to work outside of the hospital can really help with that satisfaction, reduce commutes, all of that. Patient satisfaction is kind of obvious. I don't know about you, but if I have a choice of where I want to go for care, a hospital is the last place I want to be. Going into the hospital is actually one of the greatest predictors of death. And then equity, of course, that's one of our big goals in reducing outcome gaps and increasing access across the board. So a couple points of the features of this: we're really re-anchoring care in the communities instead of a hospital. Historically, hospitals are like a fortress on the hill, and it kind of radiates outwards. They decide where to put services based on who can pay the most money. They call it payer mix versus where the actual needs are. When we anchor in the community, we can better control services, and you already have a relationship of trust. We talked about care at home. Up to 40% of primary and acute care today could happen in the home. And then right-sizing the hospital. Financially, this does assume we're changing our system from a fee-for-service to more value-based. What that means is right now, most doctors and health systems get paid based on how many tests they order, procedures they do. They don't get reimbursed for keeping you healthy, but there are financial systems that do that. The idea is that we're also just kind of changing our system right now as patients. Right now, we each have a relationship with hospital systems, public health, your medical group, your doctor, your probably some big tech retail. Maybe you go to CVS or order something on Amazon. Maybe they come to your home. There might be a health startup that you subscribe to for telehealth, and then insurance. And none of these talk to each other. The idea is that tomorrow, we're at the center, we own our data, and everybody has to talk to each other. That's really the ideal that everyone's trying to get to. So I'm going to skip through this a little bit because I don't know that you guys care so much. But these are the conversations that we have with our clients, talking to them about what is driving the shifts in care and like, how do we know that things can move out of the hospital? Well, we know because they have been moving out of the hospital. We know how much care can happen in the home today. We know the drivers behind the shifts, that technology is driving it, consumers are demanding it, the insurers are pressing for it. There used to be a lot more done in the hospital because you could get paid more for it. Now the insurers have caught up to that. And there's provider opportunity to do more out of the hospital. When we presented this all to our clients, a number of them said, okay, we get this long term, but we have this silver tsunami. All the baby boomers are about to retire. How could we possibly need less when we have this influx? Well, the reality is we have been slowly but surely decreasing the number of beds and the number of hospital admissions over time. We have far more beds than we need already in the US to account even for the baby boom coming into their older years. The challenge is they're just not in the right place, and they're maybe not the right kind. Maybe they're acute and they need to be for more critical care. Maybe the infrastructure's outdated, there's 2 beds to a room. It's not the number of beds, it's the quality. So, a few points on the ecosystem. So the idea with the critical care hospital is this is 100% critical care ICU level beds. During the COVID outbreak, you might remember how they were talking about not having enough ventilators and not having enough beds. The issue was they needed critical care beds and critical care staff, and that is not what they had. We have very few, only about 12 to 14% today. This is saying we need 100% of beds to be at that capacity. And then only operating rooms and an emergency department trauma center for the sickest patients. You know, this is not someplace you go because you have something that you can walk out of the hospital treated. So I mentioned ASCs. This is the next generation of care that can come out of the hospital. And it is an amazing adaptive reuse opportunity. We're working with a number of developers and taking both old big box retail stores and old office buildings and transforming them into ambulatory care. Even a few years ago, working with Henry Ford, there was an abandoned big box retail development that we put an outpatient clinic into. You know, has its challenges and opportunities there. The Community Health Hub, the idea is that this is an essential part of every neighborhood, equal to a grocery store, a library, your schools. Every urban resident should be able to get there within a 20-minute walk. It could be within any one of these buildings as a partner, but that we treat it the same way we treat, you know, the frequency of a Starbucks or a CVS. And impact here, we already know through existing data how we can improve clinical quality, reduce bed demand, increase equity, and impact climate resistance, as well as the financial piece. All of this can be done at fairly low cost. So this is one of those no-brainers. Unfortunately, this is one of the most threatened pieces of healthcare right now because they are currently federally funded as a safety net. So the idea here is that they're not all one size fits all. There is a core set of services that every health center would have: primary care, walk-in urgent care, mental health support. But then based on the need of that community and what it does or doesn't already have, you would have other services like If there's not a dentist in the community, it would have dental. If there's not a pharmacy, it would have pharmacy. Then there would be on-demand services that you don't have to build in, but they could come in as rotating specialists or, a mobile unit for things like cancer screening and neurology or podiatry. And then all of the wraparound social support, from housing to legal assistance to job training, all as part of that hub. And then the home, from things coming into you, into your home, even to the ability to have more acute care. An interesting partnership here is Best Buy, the Geek Squad, has been setting up the hospital at home for some of the health systems. I personally wouldn't trust my laptop to the Geek Squad, but maybe they're better at setting up for hospital care. Okay, so, as design students, this is going to be the part you are probably a bit more interested in. The second year, we came back and they asked us to focus on the critical care hospital and really design that as a prototype. So we started by saying to ourselves, what is the hospital of the future? And if you guys look online, there's a number of really beautiful ideas for futuristic hospitals and technology and things that kind of fly around. We wanted to ground this in what can our clients build today to prepare them for the future? So wanting to be a little bit more realistic in terms of how can we help our clients today. So we know it's right-sized. We know it's about optimizing the components. It's got to be humanized. Has to be integrated with the community. It must be sustainable, resilient, healthy, and tech-enabled. So technology is supporting all of this. It is not the driver. What we looked at is taking an average community hospital today, which is about 300 beds, and shrinking it down to, half, a third, depending on the community needs. So the hospital of today, they're typically a bed tower on top of a giant D&T platform. They usually grow out over time, a bunch of ugly connected buildings over 100 years or so, and they really become that tower on the hill. So what if we remove the ambulatory care, we remove the logistics and support, we reduce the beds? And then we really optimize the individual pieces. So, beds have a certain structural grid they like. ORs like things a little bit bigger. So you have this giant D&T platform. That's where the operating rooms, the MRIs, and the CTs are. They tend to be big chunks of real estate. What if we looked at those individually? And then what if we reconfigure them? One of our big strategies here was in terms of making it resilient and have a life after its useful life as a hospital. It's interesting, as hospitals have come along, the newer hospitals are becoming obsolete quicker and quicker, and that's because of how specialized they are and how we design them. The hospitals that were built 100 years ago, those buildings are still very functional today. And it's also in the way we stack these programs so that you really can't use them for anything after it's done. But a bed tower could also be a residential or hotel facility if it was configured otherwise. So we reconfigured it to allow for those repurposing in another life. So more of a linear stack versus a vertical, because as much as you'd like to design something today that will last for 100 years, we know it won't. We know it won't serve its purpose as a hospital today 100 years from now. But we want to make sure it's still useful and not demolished in 50 years. So the areas in green are that D&T. There's a little bit of public down in the yellow. And then those bed towers stack above on left and right. And the idea is that it could expand depending on the community size. It's just a modular prototype. And then how do we humanize it? as much of a fortress as hospitals have been, they're becoming more so today with the enhanced security threats. It's about as hard to get into a hospital as it is to get into an airport right now. It doesn't invite the community in. What if we created a place where maybe we're not triggering events as much as we are today, and creating a place where everybody feels a bit more safe and communities invited back in? And really integrating it in the community in a way that hospitals do not make good neighbors today. Nobody wants a hospital built in their neighborhood because they're big, they're noisy, they're loud with the ambulances, they're not in a residential scale, and they bring a lot of unwanted traffic. How can we make them be a better neighbor for today and in the future when it may not be a hospital anymore? So this is an example, putting it in the suburbs of Chicago, showing how, if you place it properly, you can utilize a lot of the existing neighborhood amenities to create this ecosystem. So, you have the residential places, you have the health hub, you have the school, you have the grocery, you have the blue and green, and it doesn't have to be a huge intervention. So we wanted it above all to be really welcoming to the community, that open front door, a very civic place that feels owned by the community. We are all paying for these facilities, so we should want to feel like we can come into them. And we created this trellis system that you'll see in other slides as both a uniting element for the site and also a way to bring in site adaptable elements to respond to climate and energy. Having a place where the community can come in, both in this outbuilding that is designed to be a flexible program depending on the community need. Here it's a health hub. It could be food service in another community, but having a really transparent front door to it. And creating a sense of place in the courtyard, a public courtyard, and this is totally taboo, but actually having patient rooms that you could look into just as much as you could a residential area. There's a lot of sensitivity that you typically couldn't do that, but in other parts of the world, we aren't so shut off to the health process, and so how can we kind of normalize being sick, getting healthy, having family in there, and this courtyard also becomes a place for the yoga classes and the farmers market and other community events. So back to that grid overhead, the idea is that depending on the site, it can be either photovoltaic, could be a green roof, it could be shading, so it could be really climate adaptable. So it's a high level idea. We didn't get granular into figuring it out, but what's most important is that we unify the site. And we partnered with engineers to really validate the design. So with BR+A and Thornton Tomasetti. So in speaking with them, they said, you still have to throw everything at this to make it net zero because hospitals still demand so much energy and water. And the fact is, because we're reducing the size, yes, but we're leaving the most intense pieces within it, the spaces that require the most climate control, the most air, the most water. It's concentrated intensity. So we still need all the energy recovery. We still need the photovoltaic. We still need the batteries. We still need offsite renewable energy. We still need rainwater collection. But we also want to ask the question, can we do this out of mass timber? Because it hasn't been done before. A hospital in the US has not been built out of mass timber yet. And the answer is a little bit, it depends on your state. It might be a little bit more challenging in California, and it will require partnership with the regulators and the policymakers in interpreting, but it absolutely can be done, especially with a lower rise building like this. And we were not sure that in like the D&T platform, where there's a lot of vibration sensitivity, that it would even be possible. So that was one of the more technical pieces of this research. So we did studies looking at, was it a hybrid versus all timber, and looking at the patient floors separately from imaging and operating. So the vibration sensitivity is around like those imaging equipment that if things are shifting a little bit, they just won't work. But we are still able to get all mass timber with slightly reduced column bays. So, this is very high level, but just passing the sniff test that it is possible. These are the limitations, and the biggest point is if you're going to be the first, you're going to have to kind of pave the way with the regulators. So, as an interior designer who spent a lot of time designing in hospitals, wood is pretty much not allowed anymore right now. It's kind of interesting that wood is feared as a place a vector of infection, a place that you can't clean, a place that bugs will like to hide. And as a result, the hospitals are getting more and more sterile. Fake wood just doesn't always cut it. So we wanted to really make sure that the interiors were fully embracing the potential of a more healing environment, going back to what we've done for a very long time, and not being scared of wood. I mean, wood is naturally antimicrobial, especially if you don't put all the varnishes on it. So I think we're a little bit over fearful of some very basic materials. And then daylight is the other piece. Most hospitals are multiple city blocks deep. They have no daylight in the interior. A lot of the staff goes a 12-hour shift without ever seeing daylight. This smaller, narrower kind of footprint makes sure that you always have connection to the daylight, whether you're patient, staff, or visitor. Plants are another thing that are very controversial in healthcare, but they have incredible healing potential. They can clean the air. People get scared about water and soil and bugs, but kind of putting it out there, what if we didn't? What if we more embrace the healing potential versus the fear of what a little fly is going to do? And then, the idea of renewal, how do you design a highly technical intensive care patient room that in 20 years could become a dorm? It could become supportive housing. It could become workforce housing. It could become a hotel. So we looked at the structure of those rooms in a way to maximize the daylight and really simplify a floor plan in a way that can be more multi-purpose. And these things we did not go deep in. They were more creating the visualizations to tell the big picture story, to help inspire our clients and tell the story. So I think that's it. I would love to, open it up to questions, comments, thoughts.
Do you have any questions?
Hi. There's a couple of hospital units that you didn't talk about, like the teaching hospital or the research hospital. Did you just discard that as part of your research, or did you incorporate it and just didn't talk about it today?
Yeah. So we had conversations with a number of academic medical center leaders. And because they're kind of a different beast when we're talking about this model of shrinking, we're still going to need those specialty centers of excellence. You know, people travel all over the world to come to that kind of care. And so we decided to put it aside. What was interesting in those conversations is they got what we were doing, they agreed with it. They were most interested in the community health hub part of the research because that was foreign to them, but they were curious.
Thank you. That was great. So in your talk, you talked about how, well, you just, in answering Steve's question, said that those sort of specialty research found the community hub interesting. Have you found that perhaps maybe the research or some of these other sort of specialized areas, have you found places already doing some of these things and maybe not implementing the entirety of the plan, but pieces of it and seeing success? And can you give some examples of that maybe?
Yeah. So the hospital at home piece is we're seeing those pilots, and the conversation is waiting to see the downstream results in terms of being able to reduce the bed demand. I'm working on a very large hospital expansion right now, and we're having those conversations of, if we do this right, can we build fewer beds? So that's part of the conversation. There are a number of health systems. There's a big academic health system in Chicago that is financing a health equity center, community health hub, because they understand the downstream impact. I think where you're going to see short-term the most action is in more of a closed system. So Kaiser is a closed system. They're insurers, and they have hospitals, and they have health centers, and they are incentivized to keep people healthy, keep them out of the hospital. And so that's why we're seeing them build the homes. They've already done some small hospital pilots, and they're tracking the data a lot more to really optimize that. You need the incentives to really align this behavior. The fact is that hospital beds are what generate a lot of revenue right now. So that is a hurdle we're going to need to get beyond before we see a lot more action. Yeah.
Hello, is it on? It is, okay. I guess I'm curious about whether you noted, what differences you noted between more urban hospital settings and more rural healthcare systems.
Yeah, so rural health is a very different challenge. A lot of rural hospitals are closing. We really did focus more on the urban setting because it's such a difference. If they have a hospital, it might only have 8 beds right now, and it's really that critical access kind of hospital. They're transporting people who are really sick out of those communities. You're not going to build a critical care hospital in those rural settings. The real potential there is the community health hub and the virtual and the home piece. Those we see having the biggest impact in rural health. So, the ability to get those specialists to you wherever you are. And we see that's why there's a huge rise in these virtual health platforms, is giving people options. Because it doesn't matter where you are. Like right now, if you go and you try to find a top dermatologist in your city, see how long it takes to get an appointment. Might take 3 months. So these virtual opportunities are both helping rural communities as well as all of us. And the federally qualified health centers that are kind of the basis of these health hubs, they're a huge part of our rural health system right now, and they're very much in threat right now.
Thank you. This was great. I'm kind of struck. The first part of what you were talking about is this relationship. Almost, if it wasn't healthcare, I'd say it was almost like an understanding of a business model and the impact or agency of that business model on what you would actually be designing. And I think we talked to our students about that. There's broader notions maybe in product design or service design about looking at that and then the impact that comes later. I'm curious how you build those relationships, because I think from an educational perspective, it would be amazing to have students in a situation where they could start to, I don't know, I imagine there's a whole bunch of nuance that has to go into all of your conversations with all of your clients to understand, even if they're not articulating those types of issues, how you start to get that out of them. And then your job is to kind of translate that into a proposal or a design or something else. Any sense about how we build that maybe experience into education so that we could start to get students more attuned to that?
Yeah, and I never thought I would that I would be interested in understanding the business as much as I did when I was a student. But it's really the same paths of inquiry, because you start with asking questions and getting to the why of things. And I would say, if you're only dealing with one client and project, it's a little bit harder, but as you experience more, you start to notice the differences and that there's not one answer. And then when you're trying to unpack the why, you get more to the business drivers behind it, because when you're working with a developer versus a nonprofit, they have very different goals. And so, you're getting, when you're talking to your client about what their goals are, look for those business cues. Are they trying to be able to sell something to make a profit? Are they trying to increase their, or capture a new audience? Or a lot of their goals are financial. It's just how you interpret it. And as designers, when we're trying to sell our designs, we have to speak our client's language, and often it is financial in the commercial world. So. Well, we won't press the students for questions.
If any student is interested in joining us in Bonny for dinner at 6:30 at Affleck House, we have a few spots available. Just talk to Andrea here after the lecture.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.